Our next item is a Deep Creek Bridge update, and with us tonight we have Colonel Patrick Kinsman from the Army Corps of Engineers.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Happy New Year. Greetings from me to you, and again, honored to be here to provide an update on a tough project. It builds on my updates from a year ago at our public meeting at Deep Creek Middle School, and my update to Council this past June of 2020. And first, I'd like to say again, thanks again to City Manager Price and the city staff for their collaboration on a tough project. As I said before, and I just have to put this out here, love to be able to talk about great work that's going well elsewhere. Arlington National Cemetery, both sides of Joint Base Langley, Eustis, water projects, working closely with the Port of Virginia, deep into Norfolk Harbor, et cetera, et cetera. But I know that's not the subject of tonight. Those projects are going well. This one does remain a challenge, and it has my absolute focus. In both the January and June meetings, I talked about kind of the three things needed to reach the award of a construction contract to build a bridge. And those three buckets were real estate, as in the legal access to the land. They were utility relocations done by utility companies, which I don't control. And the third bucket is really construction funding. But before that, an authorization, an increased authorization from Congress to allow us to award that particular project. So the bluff that I have, the bottom line up front, is that since June, we made some progress, some good progress. It's not as much as I would have liked. It remains a challenging project, and we're going to continue to push on this considerably. I'm confident that the bridge is going to be built, and I get into the citizens that are watching as well. It will be built, and we are working hard to deliver that project. In December, I engaged some of the senior folks in the Corps of Engineers, both in our real estate and our council chains, so legal and our real estate experts, to impress upon them how important this project is. And later on this week, I have a meeting that was rescheduled from yesterday with my headquarters as well to discuss the specifics on condemnation packets, which I will get into. Like in January and June, I won't talk about specific landowners. And a point that I made in June as well is, again, in our effort on behalf of the federal government to achieve those rights to the land, we are working not just on behalf of the government, but really doing due diligence to the taxpayers, both those that will pay the bill, if you will, for taking the property, and those that perhaps may lose property in the condemnation action, and doing that just and fair manner is certainly important. So I'd like to go in just a little bit of the details. Again, first, talk about our real estate bucket. In January, so about a year ago, we had 32 of the 40 parcels required. We added one more in June for 33, and this past December, we added two more, so we're now at 35 of the 40 parcels required. So those two additional that came in December, thanks to the city for the one acquisition that the city did, and we also had another owner agreed to the terms and is settling. So that property is in the process of closing. So the 5 parcels left, that's 2 owners, essentially 2 condemnation packets, and again, 5 overall parcels. Those condemnation packets, if you remember from my update in June, we sought an updated appraisal through a contracted company. We received those updated appraisals in the September-October time period. We went back out to owners and made an offer to settle. We have not reached agreement, again, with 2 owners, 5 parcels, and so we are moving forward with condemnation. And the first packet is the discussion, has been the discussion for a long time, and is the discussion of my Thursday discussion with my higher headquarters in resolving a handful of issues, again, within council and real estate chains to allow that packet and then the others to go forward. When I talked about the timeline there with real estate, we seek to be done, the Corps of Engineers, with the real estate actions by May of 21. The packets will route through the Corps, go to the Army, and then go to the Department of Justice. 3 to 4 months, again, outside my control, we expect the Department of Justice to issue a declaration of taking. And so, again, May to about September, we hope to have the final declaration that the properties are in the control of the Corps of Engineers / the U.S. government. Utility relocations, going to that next bucket, 4 companies involved: Columbia Gas, Cox, Verizon, and Dominion Power. We have agreements with those specific companies and how they are going to make the move. Those companies are now working with landowners to achieve the easements required to make the actual utility relocations happen. Since June, we've added 6 more easements, so we now have 25 of 27 easements completed, and the 2 easements remaining are involved in, as you might guess, one of the owners that has property being condemned. So, in effect, access to that property by utility companies may depend on when it comes into the ownership control of the government. Our real estate team is still facilitating negotiations, discussions with the particular property owner, and is hoping to reach agreement, but has not been successful so far. So big picture, 25 of 27 utility easements necessary. The good news is we expect Columbia Gas, who's completed all their permits by late this month or early February, to begin their utility relocation work. And the other companies involved are making a business decision on when they see and want to start that particular work to move their utilities. Big picture wise, again, on utilities, estimating, right? I say that estimating because I'm not in control of that, is a September 21 completion of those utility relocations. The last major bucket really is funding, or construction authority and funding. Again, for all work done with the Corps, we need an authority to work under in the appropriation to fund the work. As we have completed revised cost estimates over the last couple years, in June I talked about the April cost estimate and an additional need for about $9.9 million. That includes contingency. We were going through the right authorization process to request that from Congress. We submitted that validation study in August, and the short of the long story is Congress included it in the recent Water Resources Development Act that was approved, signed on the 27th of December, which gives us an authorized project cost of $59.5 million at a current FY21 price level. To the actual appropriation money that we're short, I hope to have good news on Friday. That is the expected time when the administration will release what is known as a work plan for the Corps of Engineers Civil Works projects over and above what we receive in the President's budget. For this particular project, we expressed a capability of $12 million, and I have to wait on what the work plan amount is. We needed minimum $4.5 million to award a construction project, and we hope to get at least that in the work plan. Good news, we got an authorization, and we are, and I really appreciate the council and the legislative effort to clarify and express the need that the Corps for funds for this particular project. So if we look at, again, done with the 3 buckets, the overall timeline, I want to be completely done with our portion of real estate by May, that declaration of taking through the Department of Justice by September. Also by September, again, hoping the utility relocations, again, ballpark, the Corps of Engineers would be ready to advertise a construction contract at that same time period, and same timeline that I spoke to in June, we remain on, where awarding a construction contract in February of 22, a couple months later to start the work, and construction completion, again, roughly April of 2025. How can you help, you might ask? So engagement with utility companies, again, above and beyond what the Corps of Engineers is doing. Certainly on the funding aspect, we'll know, hopefully, if that work plan is released on Friday, we'll know what's in it. And again, the staffs will communicate that result immediately. And then continued advocacy to both seniors within the Corps of Engineers, the Army, specifically Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, and perhaps even the Department of Justice. I've asked the head real estate and head counsel within the Corps to reach out to the Department of Justice and let them know that this project is coming. Pending any questions, that's the update, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Are there any questions, Councilor?
Mr. Manager, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Colonel, thank you very much. This was obviously continues to be anticipated by not only council, but the citizens of Deep Creek and certainly the entire city. One question about the utilities. I mean, obviously, I certainly don't doubt your word. You've painted a relatively optimistic view of making closure on that by September, October with 4 major utilities and a number of somewhat complex realignments, relocations. I mean, could you elaborate a little bit more? What is your sense of the Corps working with the utilities to commit themselves to a diligent effort to meet, what has been a very drawn-out timeline on the entire project?
Yeah, so I would say that we're collaborating with them. We're talking about the importance of the particular project, and I would hope that they see that as members of the community as well, and within their other work that they're doing, prioritize the projects accordingly. Certainly, with 25 of 27 utility easements obtained, I think there is some pre-planning, design, construction work that really, design and planning work that can be happening now, and we'd ask them, and I don't control them again, but I'd hope that they would start as soon as they're able to.
Colonel, I too want to thank you for coming out and explaining where we are. I appreciate your honesty. I'll go back to you in just a minute. But I did want to ask a question about your the funding aspect of it. So do I understand that all of that is within the Corps? There's no congressional action required?
So, sir, that's the work plan is primarily within the Corps, and then it goes up through the Army and to the Office of Management and Budget, which is an executive branch agency. So within the Corps, we've expressed the need for that $12 million to give us the full amount of need, full amount of funds so that we can award the project. Engagement with multiple levels is important, but it's not necessarily dependent on Congress. Congress, I think, can advocate for it and can advocate with the Office of Management and Budget as well in OMB. They can also, through a National Defense Authorization Act or other appropriations, request that funding. A little disjointed there, Mr. Mayor,
No,
but I think
understand.
engagement with Congress is important in seeking that funding.
whenever you start explaining federal government, it gets a little complicated. I do understand. Mr. Best?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this, Colonel, thanks again. Also, I echo what Dr. Dietrich said. Thank you very much for coming down here. Obviously, this bridge is extremely important to a lot of lives in our city, and of course, not just those who live in the Deep Creek community, my family included, but also the commuting public that goes through that area, trying to get to work and school and so forth. I had two questions, really. One not really involving the Army, but where the Army Corps of Engineers and the City of Chesapeake merge. Obviously, there's a piece of this on both sides of the bridge, I understand, is a city responsibility. So coordination, I'm looking at our Public Works Director, coordination of effort is that all of those, our contracts will be in line to be awarded at the same time that it appears that they're ready to move. And Colonel, I appreciate you willingness to put a month and a year on an anticipated completion date. Give something we can actually look at, April of 2025. Of course, we understand there's a lot of water to go under that bridge, no pun intended, between now and then. But that we will be coordinating very tightly with our schedule on both sides of the bridge so that everything comes together at one time. And then secondly, this, Mr. Manager, this is for you, is the ability to backstop this project in the event that the $12 million doesn't come forward from the federal government. Can we, without objection, we need to be looking at a way that we can backstop this project to keep the project online so that it will be completed, because I would hate for us to tell the citizens of Deep Creek and Chesapeake that, oops, we're sorry, we can't build a bridge after all because we're $12 million short. So that's just would not be an acceptable answer. So can you reflect on that for us, please?
I can. If you recall, when we discussed this last year, we had expressed some concern about the city participating in a backstop fashion because the top line authorization was we were so close to the top line authorization amount that if that authorization authority wasn't increased, in effect there was some concern that the city's money would evaporate because you'd have to go back through reauthorization and increase that top line amount. Given that top line amount now looks to be or we've been successful in having that increased, we're in a more comfortable position, I think, being able to take a look at that. So obviously it's a federal project. Hope that the federal funds come through. If the council retreat, council identified this project as one of, if not the #1 infrastructure priority in the city. So if council were to deem that to be the most important infrastructure project, then certainly we'd be able to bring forward an item for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And sir, let me just add that one great point. So city and core staff are tied at the hip. Once we know the details on the number in the work plan, and again, hopefully released by the administration this Friday, then there's going to be some dialogue going back and forth. And as City Manager Price says as well, I think that contingency planning as well, what could happen based on what that number is something that we're do right away. To the month and year, sir, I appreciate that as well. As I look at the history of this project, we collectively obviously could have done a lot better in our communications, but I probably didn't say it enough that the contingencies of don't control the real estate company, certainly don't control the funding, and above the Norfolk District, I don't control much. And so I'm pushing as hard as I can up. I will reach out again, through the Corps of Engineers, through the Army, and it's got to go to, again, the real estate condemnation packets through the Department of Justice as well. And I would love to be able to get them through like that, but I'm subject to others.
Mr. Hamel, do you have a...
Yes, sir, but I think you see Ms. Ritter's lights on first.
That's right, you go ahead.
Colonel, thank you for being here again. Could you tell me, I'm not familiar with the Army as much, do you have like a planned rotation date when you're set to move out of your position? And how does that work timing-wise?
I'll depart this summer. I'm already in contact with my replacement, and we'll do an excellent handover with him, which will include introduction to the city manager and staff. As it stands now, I am not moving. As it stands now, as of the end of this year, I will release my state of residence where I'm originally from in Washington, and I will technically become a city of Chesapeake and a Virginia resident.
Oh, that's great. The timing that you said about the completion of April of 2025, and I hesitate to ask questions about things that I know nothing about because it shows really my ignorance, but is a 4-year timing to build this bridge, is that, just give us some perspective.
Sir, 2
please.
phases, really. So if you obviously a 2-lane bridge right now constricts traffic, and so replacing it with a 5-lane bridge. So what we're going to do is keep the existing bridge in operation in place. We need the additional land and real estate so that we can build 3 lanes adjacent, get the traffic routed to the 3-lane bridge, brand new, tear down the old 2-lane bridge and build 2 new ones. So that's why you see the extended timeline there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I echo, as the city manager said, when we talked about this at our retreat, I think there was a general consensus on council that this is, if not the highest priority, the #1 priority for transportation infrastructure improvement for the city. And I'm sure you're getting that from us. I'm only in my first term on council, and maybe my only term. I'm not even here 3 years, but I feel like, we're seeing a little bit of progress. But for the people that have been waiting for this for 20 years, telling them, or more than that, right? Telling them that we need to wait another 4 is it's hard to swallow that. So for what it's worth, I hope that when you do that turnover, you'll bring your successor in and let him know that you have the full support of the council. This is our #1 priority. Thank you very much for your presentation here.
Sir, acknowledge. Thank you.
Ms. Ritter?
Thank you. I want to add my thanks. I know that people previously in your job, and I'm sure whoever relieves you will take as much interest and advocacy as you have. And I'm just, as a sidelight, guessing you must have college-age kids. Hence, you want them to go to school. And that's why we changed our residence years ago. Anyway, I'd like to go back to the condemnation issue, if I might. The federal process is different than our local process. So if you could just reiterate for people who may be listening, once it's cleared by DOJ, then it doesn't go through a protracted court case. You take possession of the property, and the negotiations on compensation may continue, but it does not prevent you from actually physically acquiring the property. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. No, I will. That is a great point to clarify as well. And as we look at, again, doing due diligence, seizing of or taking of private property is certainly something that needs to be done with a lot of due diligence, as I stated earlier. So as we look at presenting a fair market value offer to a current owner, the owner can obviously accept or not accept that offer, and we, my real estate professionals will ask them to provide input on what they think the value of their land is, and their own appraisal or other documentation that we can consider as part of the overall process. And that is something that we've continued to extend to landowners even as we got a second round of appraisals last fall. So then, ma'am, as you pointed out, it goes into the process through the Corps, through the Army, then to the Department of Justice, and anywhere from, again, perhaps 3 to 4 months or so, the Department of Justice, through the courts, will issue a declaration of taking, which is the formal action moving the property into the control of the U.S. government. The Just compensation is a decision then that happens later in a separate hearing and through the courts. And so as we talk about timeline, again, not in control of it, but if the condemnation process gets through DOJ and there's a declaration of taking, again, early fall, late summer, September perhaps of 21, then the U.S. government owns the land at that point. And we can take, appropriate action, reach agreements with perhaps utility easements, but move forward immediately.
But the compensation, that discussion can continue once you get the declaration.
Yes, ma'am. And that discussion is then in the courts and well out of and well above certainly my level.
Okay, and I'm sure that if there's any advocacy on the part of the city that would be of assistance to whomever, that we know about that and we can pursue that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And if you could, I don't want to belabor this. We have other things, and I'm sure you have other things too, although all of our lives are curtailed to some extent. If we could get, I don't know whether it would be you in collaboration with our city management folks, really a step-by-step I don't want to go back through it, but a step-by-step that we can communicate on the authorization/appropriation issue. I think I've been here too long. This is at least our third authorization. So, I think I don't want the confusion to exist. And if we could get a step-by-step process for the public to understand what the authorization actually is and what steps have to be taken to for you to have that funding in hand. Would that be possible to do?
Man, we can work with City Manager Price to get something out.
Thank you. I think that, people are really, it's no secret, people are very anxious for this project. But on the other hand, if they can see the step-by-step and see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think it'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Colonel, I recall greeting you when you first arrived with Hampton Roads with other leaders throughout the region, and you and your wife, and certainly was pleased that you were going to be settling in Chesapeake. And I will look forward to doing that to you as a citizen, and also to let you know that we have many boards and commissions of which you can use. We could use you during your free time.
Absolutely.
Honored to serve, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.